is on the other side of the world. He's up in America, and he is a personal brand photographer. And when he's not taking pictures and making sure that everyone's nice and comfortable in front of the camera, he is the founder of Brand Hero Summit and Your Personal Brand podcast, which is in the top 100, isn't it?
Yeah, it's it goes in and out, but yeah, 5 countries it's hit the top 100, so it's pretty happy about that.
I'd be pretty happy about that too. Thanks for joining me, Aaron. So, can you just introduce yourself a bit more, give a bit more depth than to my audience?
Yeah. So I am a personal brand photographer, and a lot of people that I run into are like, really, that's all you do? That's and yeah, it is. I spent 25 years in industry, leading different corporations and sort of building their profitability and efficiencies. And I just really wanted to start using my love of photography to help businesses in a different way. So I work with small business owners and individuals to really build their personal brand so that they can reach a larger audience and ultimately make more money.
Can we talk about how you were in a fairly corporate role for 25 years
Yes.
to suddenly switch in 2018 to a very creative role? What was the switching point? What happened?
Well, it wasn't a sudden switch, actually. It's been a gradual transition, but my role in corporate really is I started as an industrial engineer. So I think one of the things that maybe made me successful in all my different leadership roles was my creative problem solving and just the creativity that I used in general. And so, I feel like most of my corporate career, I was just fighting against the urge to be too creative, right? To still have to fit in a little bit. But that extra creativity really came in handy. I was huge into art and theater growing up. I've always had a camera, around. I could never afford a good camera growing up. So I think that's really what reignited my love of photography in 2013. Was when I finally bought a proper professional camera. I was sort of like, just all of a sudden things came rushing back. But it's been a very gradual transition, and in fact, this is probably the first public mention of it. But I've been a director at a regional health system for about 5 years still, and I just yesterday said, "Hey, I'm not going to do this next year, so it'll just be all photography next year."
Oh, wow, that's incredible. You made a comment there about, you weren't fully in photography for a while because you didn't have the right equipment. But I'm a firm believer that the equipment is secondary to it, because some people can take a good picture and some people just cannot take a good picture. Can we talk a little bit about what it is that was your job as a photographer? Like, I know, because I love working with photographers, I know that personal brand photography is really important. But can you just tell the audience a bit more about what it is you're looking for when you're working for someone?
Yeah. So just to clarify the equipment statement, basically, what I had been shooting up until 2013 was the equivalent of using your cell phone. So I think for any type of profession, there's a certain level of technical expertise that you might need to have, and especially if there are those kind of things involved. And so when I made my switch, actually, I didn't buy the most modern camera. I bought a film professional camera, and I shot film until 2018, and just started really honing my craft that way. Um, Photography, there is some creativity to it, but I think the creativity can be learned. I think it's one of those things. I don't know who originally said the quote, but you need to learn the rules to be able to break the rules. I think anything, if you get into a discipline and a practice, whether it's a sport, whether it's coaching, whether it's, I mean, any type of career, even engineering. When I was doing a lot of electronics engineering early in my career, you had to practice learning how to repair televisions and DVD players and stuff. And you knew that every once in a while you were going to fail and it was going to cost the company some money, but that was the way you got really good at it, was doing this practice. So, in 2013, when I bought a really nice camera, I started practicing, shooting film again. And some of the first rolls, there were no usable pictures, right? It's just the way it turns out. And I made some mistakes. There was a travel mistake where I had actually shot, I wasn't at the World Cup, but I was in Italy during the World Cup. And I had shot two different groups of fans watching their national teams in Italy. So it was a really cool experience, right? And I had some specialty film that I'd taken with me specifically for the idea that maybe I could, catch and the goal was English nationals in Rome and Argentinian nationals in Rome, to do those photos. Uh, and it was just a brutal trip back. Things got delayed. There was all kinds of problems. And on the very last scanning at JFK Airport, I forgot to pull the film from my travel bag, and all of those photos were erased by the X-ray scanner. So there were plenty of failures along the way, but when you start having those failures, then it starts giving you the skills and the ability to see some of the other things. So that, on my most recent shoot in New York, I was working with a lot of other photographers as well. And when they saw the images that I came away with, they're like, how do you come up with this stuff? And I've been doing it a while. I've been experimenting, and I've been, trying different things. So maybe there is a certain amount of just natural, vision, but I think it's the repetition and the learning the rules, and just doing the practice and shooting on a consistent basis that leads you to you know, to that higher level of performance. And it's actually what I'm looking forward to most in 2021, is just having the freedom to creatively explore things that don't apply to my branding clients, and then, eventually those will lead back into a shoot at some point, right? There'll be this spark of inspiration, be like, ooh, I remember that one January when I was doing macro photos out in the wilderness in the snow, right? And we did this would fit well for this client. And that's sort of how most of my career has been. I've always experimented with things that are a little outside of my core job. And then ultimately, at some point, some of those find their way back in. So I know that was a long, meandering answer, but.
Yeah, but I'm going to disagree with you because I don't think everyone has it in them to be able to take a good picture.
Okay, well, that's.
I totally get where you're coming from. Like, everything is about repetition. Lessons learned, failures, all that kind of stuff. But I just, like you just said, you were in New York, and some of the other photographers were like, "Where are you getting these pictures from?" And they're in your field as well. It is very creative. Like I'm always super impressed when you work with a really good photographer. And I've seen a lot of your images. Like, it's about the personality coming through. I think if you're a landscape photographer, you've got the weather is either for or against you, or maybe you want moody weather. If you're in Scotland, you're definitely going to want moody weather. You can probably learn that a bit easier, and you've got more kind of control over what you do. But with people, well, I think that's a real skill. I personally do. So I think what you're doing is not easy and can be learned particularly well.
Well, I appreciate that. Maybe it's sort of like professional golf. You can learn the game, but maybe you can't play it at a certain level. So.
100%. Plus, it's not just being able to take pictures behind the camera. A lot of what you do and what other personal photographers do is actually making the person on the other side of the camera comfortable, because that, I think, is a bigger challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's, one of the things, as I got to the point where I started focusing just on personal branding, I've developed a process to get good photos of you. You need to be comfortable with your photographer. And I've shared this story on my blog before, and some of my process has changed because of other failures. And not that we always need to fail, but it's a really good teacher when it happens. And this failure it's not like the photos were bad. They just weren't what I hoped to do for this individual. And we had done a destination shoot. We had traveled to a historic location in Florida because it fit their brand. It's a place that they visit on a regular basis. But there were parts of my process that they just didn't feel like they needed to do, like my branding questionnaire, and really doing something like, it just seemed like a lot of work. To literally, when I was getting on the plane to head down there, I'm like, I still don't have 100% clear plan of what we're trying to do here, because the individual hasn't given me enough information. And they wore the wrong clothes, they were nervous, and it was one of the most uncomfortable shoots I've ever done in any situation. And it prompted me to say, you know what, I'm not even going to book a date with somebody until they do that questionnaire, because the questionnaire sort of gives me some of the insight into who you are as a person. It allows us to start having a discussion on a much more relational level, to the point where we start developing this trust and this confidence in each other. And then, as the subject, you understand why you're doing these photos. Like, you get a very clear picture of, like, this is what we're trying to do. And so most of those nerves now go away. It's not about you getting your camera, your photo taken or being on camera. It's about you creating marketing images, or you creating, some other type of product that allows you to contribute more and make a larger impact in the way that you do it. And when it gets to that point, now it's not about, oh, I don't want my picture taken. It's the excitement about, like, I can't wait until these photos are done, because then I can do this. Then we'll be able to do this. Then we can launch this. And since I made that switch, I mean, um, every shoot has just been, it's been fun. I mean, it's been, borderline amazing, and it feels like, I enjoy it. You love it when your clients are like, "Oh my gosh,"
Yeah.
uh, the one client, I loved it because she like instantly, we left the gym. She's a fitness coach, and instantly she's on Instagram. Like, I just came out of this photo shoot, and she was basically, she's like, dang, I look good, it's like, it's a good feeling. It's part of why I do what I do, because I love people to see themselves, quite frankly, the way I do. I mean, there is so much beauty in every person on the planet, that if I can capture part of that and let them see it, it just, I feel like my job is done.
I love that. That's really beautiful, because a lot of the time when I'm working with clients and I'm scheduling personal brand shoots for them, it's very much about their audience. It's a lot less about them and them feeling good, and a lot more about who they're trying to attract, and making sure that they've got their face, they look friendly, that their logo, because I talk about faces being logos all the time, is on show, because you're never off anymore.
Right.
You might be at home in your pajamas, or at the gym in your trackies, and you are still showing up online whether you like it or not. It's whether you like what it is that people are seeing, and is it a true representation of you. Because technically speaking, I know a lot of the world is still in lockdown, but when you show up and catch up with someone, you don't want to feel duped because that person doesn't look like the person you've seen online. And we're all doing it. Like, we all search each other online, we're checking Instagram, we're checking LinkedIn, we're making sure this person is real. I think that photography is so important for that. So it's nice to hear you talk about getting that person comfortable and them seeing themselves like others are seeing them, which is just lovely.
Yeah, and it's funny you mentioned that, because we can really develop good relationships virtually at this point. If you do it the right way, if you're willing to be transparent, if you're willing to be who you really are. And one of the things that frustrates me about when people reach out to me about personal branding, they're like, well, isn't this just like renting Lamborghinis and making it look like you're better than you are? I'm like, no. Right, it's literally about showing who you really are. And there may be some aspirational things. It's, so I don't know if I've had any clients use any of the cars that I rent, but when I travel, I like to rent a nice car. And so sometimes it's a Corvette, sometimes it's a Mercedes, sometimes it's and then I chauffeur, clients around in those as we're doing the shoots. So it depends on the person, is really decides the car. But it wouldn't be bad to show that car, in their feed, as long as it's in the context of, hey, this was the car from our photo shoot, right? Or whatever it is, it's because it does build your brand. You've invested in those photos. You've paid a little bit for that card as well, right? So I don't see a problem with that, but it's not about like, hey, check out my new ride, and it's not your car. So it definitely is. How do you get very transparent with that? And actually, a really good friend of mine at this point, we still haven't met in person. We've tried 3 times, and it's been foiled a couple times by COVID. But it's just, we actually feel very close to each other. And for 2 years, all we've done is talk weekly on Facebook and LinkedIn. We send each other videos. I think at this point we've sent each other little gifts, because we've gotten to know each other to that point. I mean, to the point where even at one point he sent me pictures of a sunset, because he knows how much I like sunsets, ocean sunsets. It's one of my favorite things to shoot when I'm traveling, just for myself. And he's like, hey, I know you would like this. And it's like, you really can get to know somebody even just this way.
Oh, completely. I mean, well, we met online
Yeah,
through LinkedIn and through mutual connections. Well, actually, not through mutual connections. We found out we had them afterwards.
yeah,
But I was part of a mastermind which was in America, and some of them are like my closest friends now. Like we talk on a very regular basis. So, yeah, look, we're in a global world now. Like we have been for a long time, but I think everybody has been pushed into it now, and we have to accept that. So it is about turning up online as you want to be seen, and I think that's more important than it ever has been.
right. Yeah, absolutely.
Now, I want to ask you a bit more about the Brand Hero Summit. Where did that concept come from? How did you put it together? Tell me all about it.
So that came from, basically started at the beginning of this whole COVID lockdown. I had 12 trips planned in 2020. I had, by the end of March, I think I had 14 photo shoots that had either been canceled or postponed, and or end of April rather. And I spent all of April just trying to connect with as many people as possible. I mean, even famous people. I mean, everybody was home, right? And so it was amazing the people that you could reach out to, and get an audience with, even if it was just for 15 minutes, even if it was like, hey, I'm doing this live thing here. Why don't you just come to this? I'm like, okay, great. And so there were 45 different people that I'd sort of put on my list that I wanted to connect with, in some way, to learn from them, to basically, figure out how I could, understand some of what they're doing, if there's any way I could serve them. So that was April. And then in May, I started thinking, I haven't been able to find anybody really who's doing like an event. There were all kinds of, summits and events popping up at that time because everybody was starting to go virtual. Like there was nobody doing an event that was just around personal branding. I really couldn't find too much. Chris Ducker does the Brand Use conference, or he has basically, it's basically a personal branding conference in London every year.
Brandpreneur, yeah.
Yeah, Brandpreneur. That's it.
Youpreneur.
Youpreneur. That's it. Yeah,
That
I'm like, I
one.
know U's in there somewhere. I couldn't remember what it was, but so that was the closest thing that I knew of, and then that was also basically either canceled or transitioned to virtual. And so I just said, I like, what would be the ideal conference that I'd like to see? And then I tried to round up a few of the people that I respect to do it, and it's like, hey, somebody needs to do this. And I sort of feel like they all sort of cornered me because I 3 or 4 people on the same day, like, hey, we've been talking, like, you've reached out to a lot of us. You just need to do this. You have the network, I'm like, yeah, right. And so, but that's how it started. And I said, okay, well, and so I started making my list and said, well, I need 20 to 30 people. And I thought I had a list of 10 that would definitely say yes. I'm like, well, let me run this by them. And I said, I'll do it all in one day. And literally all 10 of them said yes, most of them within minutes. I'm like, okay, well, I guess I'm doing it. And so then from there, it was just, sort of reverse engineering, like what were the summits that I saw that I felt worked well, that were put together the right way, that, as you say, it's a global market that we're in, and I've worked in 12 countries. I love to travel. And I said, well, I need something that, how do I put this together so that it's available wherever you are in the world? Like I didn't want to have it on a schedule that was based on Eastern time zone or something like that. And so I just basically put together a model from some of the best things that I'd seen, and, built out the system myself, did 29 other interviews. I, had a small team of people who were doing the editing and working on some of the transcripts and some of the other stuff. One of my VAs came up with a great set of marketing images, so that worked out really well. And then ultimately, we had 800 people attend something that I just sort of put together and said, hey, we need to do this. And so it was good. We had a lot of fun, and it was a nice mix of people. It was, there was a few photographers. I think the biggest problem I had early on was everybody assumed it was a photography conference. And so I had all these photographers who wanted to speak, and I'm like, I have enough photographers. And I basically had the mindset of I didn't want more than 3 people in any one category, just to make sure we had a nice diversity on personal branding. And so I had some coaches, I had some stylists, I had copywriters. I had a nice assortment of people, and it was pretty awesome.
It was really good. I was one of those 800 people that,
Oh, awesome.
that watched that. I dipped into quite a few of them because it was over 3 days.
Yeah, it was
from
3 days.
memory.
Yeah, it was like 10
Yes.
people a day, basically.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it was fantastic because I was just watching them at my leisure during the day, and then they would disappear, and then I'd get the next lot. So I loved it. I loved the concept. I thought it was really easy to consume because I think you're right. There's been so many virtual conferences, summits, events in the last 10 months that we're kind of a bit overwhelmed with them, and some of them have hit the mark, and yours is one of them. Just with I think with the format, it was very easy to digest, whereas some of them are just I find too intense. So I was really impressed. But my next question is, will you be doing it again next year? And if so, will it still be virtual, or are you going to take it in person?
Yeah, so, God willing, yes, we plan on doing it next year. Most of the people who were on it this year have already expressed that they're interested in being part of it next year. Timing, I'm still trying to figure out if September was the right time, or if October might be a little bit better, or maybe even January. So I don't know exactly the timing. I'm going to do a little bit of studying on that early in this 21, just to figure out what the right thing is. We may expand it a little bit. Towards the end, I started getting a lot more people that were interested. So I may add a few more people. I don't know if I'll expand the days more or not. It's just, but yeah, we're going to do it. And then the other thing, it will be virtual in 21 for sure. Just I'm coming from the healthcare field, and so not that I'm a clinical person, not that I have any more knowledge than or at least not much more than most everybody else, but I'm not confident that we're going to be 100% ready to do an in-person event, and so I don't want to plan one and put the investment into that and then either have to throw something together virtual at the last minute or just postpone it. And so for 21, the next one will still be virtual, but then after that we could, it's definitely it'd be cool to be able to do some in-person stuff.
I thought it was fantastic. I will be tuning in anyway. Definitely if it's virtual, because it's a little bit hard for me to get there
Yeah.
from here and down in Australia. It's hilarious though because we've got no idea down here. It's not actually hilarious. It's just we're living in a bubble. We've got no idea how difficult it is because we have in-person events here, especially in WA, because we've had no community spread. So this week alone, I was at a breakfast with 500 people in a room, right, and that's just the norm. So maybe it's a question that's perhaps from people listening outside of WA a bit like, why would you ask that, Megan? Obviously, it'll be virtual, but we're just in such a bubble here. I've got no concept of what it's really, really like out there.
Yeah, I have a contact in northern Sweden as well, and she's like, I really don't understand what all of the why are you guys doing all of this stuff? Like we've just had our normal summer, and I'm like, yeah, well, I should have come to Sweden this year. It sounds like so, but
yes, oh, it's crazy everywhere. So what's next for you, Aaron?
I, I'm gonna probably stay on my same path of, I have a lot of, don't have a lot. I have a handful of recurring clients. I'm going to focus a little bit more on that model and how do I develop even a deeper relationship with the clients that I'm serving. What I've found is, the clients that started hiring me multiple times a year, like our photos just started getting better and better and better, and their businesses started growing more and more. And so even their staff becomes more excited, and it's just like, so when I said, well, how do I make this happen? And the pandemic, my probably the client who uses me the most, she sort of had a little bit of a panic because she's like, okay, my revenue's been down, but I have a new office that I'm going to open. I have this other launch that I'm doing. I really need 2 or 3 photo shoots over the next couple months, but I just don't know that I can afford that. And so I said, well, let me think about this. And then I just looked and I said, well, you normally do 4, maybe 5 shoots a year. Why don't I just give you a monthly price for 4 shoots over the next year? And if you just want to use 2 or 3 of them in the first 3 months, that's fine. I mean, we've been doing business long enough that I'll be willing to do that for you. And then, so that started, and then other people heard about it, and I mentioned it on the podcast, and so that's sort of the model that I'm starting to run. I think it makes it a little bit easier for most businesses instead of laying out for a professional photo shoot, once a quarter or however often they're doing it. And if you're posting on social media on a consistent basis and you're doing that, you're going through a lot of images. And so, I'm going to do that, but I'm also just going to work on some creative stuff. There are some photography techniques that I want to experiment with. Some of them I have no idea how they apply to branding, but some of them I'm like, man, I could, if I could do this kind of photo this way and be confident to do it sort of on the fly, then I could do a composite shot for a client potentially, and just create some images that really catch your attention. It's sort of the stop the scroll type of images. How do we come up with those? And I can do so much of it by doing self portraits and doing concepts myself and testing them out. But sometimes it's just the idea of, I want to be able to get a certain look for the environment that the person might be in, and then using the magic of Photoshop and other things, I can combine 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 photos together to create an image that is sort of real, like everything was actually there, but it couldn't actually happen in real life, if that
Yeah.
makes sense. So
Oh, fantastic. That sounds really interesting. I love that. I love the subscription model that you're thinking of going to as well. That's what I have with my photographer here in Perth. He does something very similar, and it's good because I need constant content. Especially my gin pictures every Friday. Um, so there's always a lot of drinking when he comes over. So we get all that together. But if you don't have that reoccurring event happening, it's very easy to just let it slide. And the next thing, especially for women, the next thing, I've got blonde hair and my pictures don't actually work anymore.
yeah, well, and I think that's the thing, is that the clients that I am working with, what they like about it is that they get a monthly reminder that, like, hey, you're paying for this, and it eliminates most of the aggravation of trying to schedule your next photo shoot, right? Because the contract's already in place. They're already, in fact, with my payment, it's just an auto draft, so you get a notice a couple of days before it's going to come out. It just gets paid automatically. You don't even have to think about it, but you do get the reminders like, hey, you still need to schedule photo shoots. And then most of them just send me a text and like, hey, I'm thinking about this. I'm like, great. And then, because I've already done the assessment, I know their brand, I
Yeah.
can start coming up with some ideas, and then just send them an idea of potential shots, and like, hey, what's something like this? How do these things sound? And usually it's like, wow, I love it. I don't know if we can do all those. I'm like, I don't either, but we'll give it a try. And sometimes it's like, I was thinking more like this. Okay, great. And then I'll come up with a new shot list. And
Love it.
so it does make it a lot more convenient. And in some ways, it forces them to do the thing that they know that they need to do, which is to have, relevant, up to date photos for their business.
Yeah, and look, that is the absolute benefit of working with a professional on your photos. I think that there's lots of things that you can DIY yourself, and still, any picture, a headshot is better than like a blank icon on your LinkedIn. But
Oh,
it's something it's totally worth investing in. Is someone who can actually guide you and get the best out of you. Like honestly, it's money well spent.
yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, obviously, I think so.
Yep.
And actually, that's been one of my biggest frustrations, is that I have struggled to find a good brand photographer to do photos of me. I had somebody I was working with, and then because we're in different parts of the country, we haven't been able to get together. And I was hoping to get some stuff done when I was in New York, but schedules were just too packed, and I was too focused with other people's photos. Sort of the old, cobbler kids have no shoes, right? So
Oh, always.
so I've been doing a lot of self-portrait and concept stuff. So I am looking forward to getting another brand shoot done myself, and that's how much I value it. So
Fantastic. Well, I'm going to put all of your links down on the show notes. If anyone who is listening or watching, you definitely need to check out some of Aaron's blogs. I find your blogs brilliant. I think they're really well constructed, and I get a lot of value out of them. And he's got a great podcast as well. And hopefully next year we'll all be able to tune into Brand Hero Summit as well. Before we go on that though, I've got one more thing about Brand Summit, because I absolutely loved when you were announcing the different speakers, the different superheroes that appeared.
oh yeah.
Is that your thing? Are you into superheroes?
I am not, right. And so it came from the idea of, when I started looking at, when I got the first 10 people, and then I think it was number 12 or 13, it might have been 12 and 13, because those numbers are sticking with me. Like, when I looked through like those first 12 or 13 people, like most of them were people that I had looked up to for several years. And it was the idea of like, man, these are almost like bringing my branding heroes together, right? It's like, and like I couldn't get the idea out of my head. And so then I sort of went back to all of the first people who had committed, and like, hey, so if I wanted to go this route and turn everybody into a superhero, like, would you be okay with like I don't want you to dress up. I just like I'm going to hire a graphic designer, right, and take your likeness and basically turn you into the superhero of your choice. Would that be okay? And I'll just use it for marketing or something. And they're like, yeah, that would be cool. And then it completely changed the name of the summit and everything else. And so it was an idea that was in my head and I couldn't shake it. And what I've learned over the years, even in business, right, is that when this idea grabs hold of you and it won't leave, you need to act on it, right? There's something about that. And, so even if people thought that the superhero thing would have been corny, it shows a little bit of my personality and creativity. And so it would have been inauthentic to not pursue it. And I think that's the important thing to figure out. And, no, and it ended up being almost like the gift to the speakers because they all loved them so much that many of them said like, man, even if I wasn't on it, just to be drawn as like because I think the artwork was really well done,
Oh, it was
uh, and
fantastic.
and most of them were just blown away and by how it wasn't like a caricature really. It was like we're turning them into Iron Man and Wonder Woman and Batman, and it looked sort of like they were drawn in a comic book, and with very realistic details, and everybody loved their superhero images. So yeah, thanks for asking, but it like I'm not into it. I'm in well, I'm into outdoor stuff. I'm into motorsports and nature. So no, I can't even get through all of the superhero movies and stuff. I just but it felt like the right thing to do.
Oh, I absolutely loved it. And my Instagram over the couple of weeks in the lead up and then during it, my Instagram was just flooded with superheroes. I loved it. I knew what it was that they were talking about or what it was referring to every time I saw a superhero. I was like, oh, they must be on the summit as well. So I thought it was brilliant. Genius. It's
Yeah, well,
great.
and it's good to hear that. Yeah, it's yeah, and we'll obviously do it again next year, and I don't see any reason to give up that brand at this point. And so yeah, and actually it has carried over into my photography business because now my subscription clients I call them brand heroes as well, and so it's because the whole point of the summit was we want to make you the hero of your brand so that you can
Yeah.
serve the people that you're there to serve, right? Superheroes in general, they're not superheroes because of who they are. They're superheroes because of what they do for the people they serve. The feeling that they of security, the protection, the good things that they do for the world and their community. And so that was really the mindset behind it. When I really started thinking about the marketing, like what do we want to do? Because when you're doing personal branding, it really isn't about you, right? It's about taking the aspects of you that are attractive, that connect with your ideal client, and then making it about your ideal client and the people that you serve. And but yeah, my subscription clients, we jokingly call them brand heroes at this point. So it's become a common theme in my business.
That's brilliant. Thanks so much, Aaron. Anything else you want to add before we wrap up?
No, I mean, invest in your photos, and at the very least, get rid of that gray box on LinkedIn. Do something that because there's a part of me that every time I see somebody that I come across, I almost feel like I should reach out to them and say, "Hey, I can fix one of your biggest problems on LinkedIn. All, all I need is a couple hours." It is a social network. It is, and especially these days when you can't meet in person that much for most people, like having that picture that is relatable and shows your face and has a smile of some sort, and like that is holding you back professionally if you don't fix that problem.
Oh,
So I just
100%.
leave that little soapbox thing there. But yeah, I reach out to me if you want to talk. Follow me on LinkedIn or Instagram. It's at the personal brand photog on Instagram, and that's also my domain name, the personal brand photog. And of course, there's the podcast, Your Personal Brand, where we talk about your personal brand.
Yeah, check out the podcast because I'm on an episode coming out in the new year, I think.
It's really soon. It's like right at the end of December or the beginning of January. So I haven't scheduled out all of the this December and January episodes yet. I have a few more to record, and but yeah, so it's coming out within the next month.
Awesome. So I am on it, but also there's millions of, well, not millions, lots and lots of other great people that Aaron has been speaking to as well. Thank you so much for your time, and I will chat to you soon.
Yep. Thank you very much, Megan. Pleasure.